Well, you heard it right there. 31-15 Bears win their second in a row. Knock off Washington that falls to 0-3. Turnovers galore for Washington in that one. And who knows where they go forward. Obviously, they don't want to rush Dwayne Haskins into action if they don't think they need to. 5 turnovers tonight by Case Keenum. Who knows how long that will go. But we'll have a good evening for you, being able to look at a lot of what happened with the Broncos, try to dissect where they are now at 0-3, how they've gotten there, where they will go going forward. We'll do that with our friend Nick Ferguson from 104.3 The Fan. He'll come on and talk about more than a few different things. If you caught him on Twitter today, you had a chance to see a lot of his little breakdowns. I'm looking forward to seeing what Nick has to say, because his thought is that maybe there's a little want to missing. Not that it's necessarily scheme, not that it's necessarily talent. So we'll have an opportunity to talk to Nick in just a little bit and break down what's going on with this Broncos team. No sacks, no turnovers in 3 weeks. And this is a team that is predicated on doing those two things. Defense first, get the sacks. It's not happening. What does that mean for the Broncos? What does that mean given the rest of their schedule? Where do you find the wins? We'll talk about all of that with Nick Ferguson next. Well, let's get right to it. The Broncos are 0-3. They haven't been completely out of these games, but at a certain point, like Bill Parcells famously said, you are what your record says you are. Joining us now is 104.3 The Fan's Nick Ferguson. Follow him at NickFerguson_25 on Twitter, where he's all afternoon and evening has been in some really interesting film breakdowns. How are you doing tonight, Nick?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay, and let me start with this, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here because we had a lot of us guess these sort of things. You had the Broncos coming out this season at 12-4. I think we understand they're probably not going 12-1 the rest of the way, but I was even less bullish. I had them at 7-9, and I'm having a difficult time trying to figure out how they go 7-6 the rest of the way. What did you expect to see from the Broncos that you have not seen yet this season?
Well, my 12-4 prediction was a prediction that was well, thought out. I went through the schedule game by game and broke it down into quarters, and I was expecting to see a defense that was going to be a dominating force. The pieces were already there in place with having a bookend, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, and looking at what Coach Fangio had with the Chicago Bears, and I felt at the time, Sean, that this Broncos defense collectively was better than the Chicago's Bears defense on paper. Now, it was a matter of execution, and I know, and rightfully so, I mean, I've taken some flack about the 12-4 prediction, and as to what were you thinking, how preposterous, and what were you drinking at that time? But it was a logical assessment on this team based on knowing what Fangio was able to do, having a competent quarterback in Joe Flacco, something that the team hasn't had in a couple of years. I just kind of thought, it was going to be a gumbo of different ingredients, and the recipe was going to be winning some football games. And the games that the Broncos have been in thus far this season, these were all games that were winnable games. You look at the Packers game, and you look at the way that they actually scored points. There were two drives that Aaron Rodgers actually went down and made some quality plays, but the Broncos, we helped them. We turned the ball over. There were 6 sacks. When you do that, it's hard to win. And right now, Sean, it's hard for this team, knowing as though they lack a lot of depth. They're not as talented as I anticipated. They cannot win close games because they make so many mistakes. And when you don't have that talent, you cannot commit penalties in key situations and take points off the board. So I'm not going to, somewhat backtrack from my prediction. It was what it was. But what I'm seeing right now is not indicative of what I thought. I mean, Josie Jewell is not an every down linebacker. He finds himself in difficult situations because he seems to not understand man coverage, where you need to place your body, and zone coverages, how far you need to drop back in coverage. And it just takes me back, Sean, to the beginning where we started with the draft. There was a guy in Devin Bush and Devin White that were there for the Broncos to take, but they decided to take Noah Fant. And the baffling part about it is you took Fant with the number 1 overall pick for the Broncos, but you're not using him, and by flexing him out like, Andy Reid does with Travis Kelce. So I'm left pulling my hair out.
You bring that up, and let's go to that offensive side. Not only were Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders the only 2 wide receivers to catch a pass yesterday, they were the only 2 that even got targeted. Juwan Winfrey was active, didn't get a look. Deshaun Hamilton did not get a look. I mean, nobody even got a look except for Sutton and Sanders on the outside. And then, like you're saying, Fant got 3, but this was dink and dunk kind of stuff. There really wasn't any aggressiveness to the offense. And truthfully, that seems to have been something that's a common denominator in all 3 of these first games.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I always go back in these situations to the play calling. What is being dialed up to get these players involved in the game? I mean, Philip Lindsay was a guy who really lit a spark and was the only spark for me in the loss against the Green Bay Packers. And it was finding ways to get him on the one-on-one matchups, get him out of space. A couple of times we saw both Royce Freeman and Lindsay on the field at the same time. Something I felt that Gangarello should have gone to earlier in the season. I know we're still 3 weeks in, and most people said, we're still early in the season. But you had 2 games prior to the game on Sunday to get those guys involved. And Sutton, a guy who came in training camp, he had a case of the drops. He showed a great amount of maturity in the past couple of games. He had one play where he was downfield, he ran and just blew up a Packers defender, and that's something that we didn't really see from Cortland Sutton last season. But, Scangarello has weapons. We've seen and we continue to see the few teams that run this style of offense, they struggle at times, but they find a way from an offensive coordinator standpoint to feature their skilled players. We still have yet to see this. I would like to see a little more creativity, a la maybe a Josh McDaniels or Sean McVay, getting their players in bunt situations. That's kind of like a cluster situation close to the line of scrimmage, or maybe a wide cluster to kind of create spacing for the route so Joe Flacco can hit these guys on time, on rhythm. But we are not seeing that, and I have no idea why we haven't seen an evolution in this offense yet.
Let's go over to the defensive side, too. We know that the Broncos are the first team since at least 1982, when sacks were recorded as an official statistic, to have no sacks and no turnovers in their first 3 games of the season. This was a defense that was designed to do both of those things. How much of this do you look at it as scheme? I noticed earlier today on Twitter you were showing how there was a little more luck with man-to-man coverage. You were showing some other games and how that works. The Broncos have a lot of their top players. We're here from the Wade Phillips era, the see ball, get ball. Now you're going with a defense that is more of a zone base. Obviously, nobody plays just zone, just man-to-man. I get all that. But some of the Broncos players seem like they're just maybe a little more comfortable in a man-to-man setting, and this does not seem to me. You played. You're going to be better at it than I am, to be a great fit for the athletes that they have on this team.
Well, with the athletes that you have on this team, you have to run a mixture of coverages. You cannot be married to one thing. You cannot be married like Joe Woods was to calling all man for 60 minutes. You cannot be married to just calling zone coverage for 60 minutes. And here's where individuals kind of, mistaken man and zone coverage. If you're going to play man-to-man coverage, you make the windows tighter for the quarterback and force him to make a great decision. His ball placement and timing has to be on. But the problem with playing man-to-man a lot is that your corners and your nickel guys and sub packages, their backs are to the quarterback, so they can't see the quarterback. Now, the luxury and the joy of playing zone coverage, and why Fangio was hired, was that it allows your defenders to see the quarterback. The quarterback is the most important person because other than the official, he touches the ball on every single play. But the problem that we're seeing that the Broncos are having with the zone coverage is that it is predicated on being able to get pressure on the edge and in the interior of the line between the 2 A-gaps. That's something that we haven't seen. And also, it forces guys in the back end to be smart, and they have to see routes and personnel as they come out of the huddle, as guys line up, as guys start to move. What I'm seeing is, though, is like these individual players that we have right now, especially at the linebacker position, is though they've never seen zone drops before. No one's ever talked to them about zone drops. And that is the crucial part when you play zone coverage. Every guy has to know what the other guy across from him or right next to him is doing. If you don't get to the right depth, it's a problem. It's no different than a wide receiver on the 3rd and 13, right? He cuts his route short but only runs it at 12. I mean, you have to run your route at 13. From guys from a defensive standpoint, I'm not seeing that. I mean, now with the blueprint being out on this team, throw short, quick passes, line up in the shotgun. You can run play action on the center. Von Miller and Chubb can't get there. And all you have to do is do what Aaron Rodgers did, use a hard count, quick count, a silent count, get those guys off sides, and then now you have a free play because the guys in the back end, they don't stay with their guys. And, Sean, I'll add this. On the play, I think it was the first quarter, it was 12 minutes and 24 seconds to go in the game. It was a shot down the field on Kareem Jackson and was Scantling, the receiver for the Green Bay Packers. The other problem with the Broncos secondary and defense collectively, that's a little different from the Chicago Bears and what we saw tonight on Monday Night Football. They give the coverage away before the ball is even snapped. Go back and watch that play. Both Simmons and Parks rolled directly to the left side of the defense over Mercedes Lewis and the other Green Bay Packers tight end. Basically what they told Aaron Rodgers before the snap, throw the ball to the middle of the field because no one's standing there. You saw the same thing happen to Isaac Yiadom in the game against the Oakland Raiders at the start of the season. And I'm sitting wondering, what are they being taught? And are they able to take from the classroom and bring it to the field? Because it is disheartening what I am seeing as a former DB who played here and who coached for the Niners. I am baffled to degree of what I'm watching on film.
He is Nick Ferguson. Make sure you catch him. He's all over the station here with 104.3 The Fan. Follow him on Twitter, Nick Ferguson _25. A lot of really great breakdowns on Twitter today with some video. Really handy way to get a little bit smarter at football. Thanks so much for your time tonight, Nick. Appreciate it. Looking forward to next time already.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Take care. That is Nick Ferguson. There's a lot to unpack there. Especially the idea that he was brought up where a lot of the guys don't seem to be entirely convinced or understand what they're supposed to be doing. That should send chills up your spine. We'll talk about why next. The Broncos have not gone 0-4 since 1999, 20 years. That's because John Elway retired. This is the track they're on. Now, I said they'd go 7-9. That's what I'd gone with. And I gave them a little extra. Maybe I was feeling a little confident. Joe Flacco had looked a little better than I thought. I originally thought 6-10. I gave him 7-9. I don't know. If you want to take a look at the downside, you can find plenty of them. They're 0-3. They've had winnable games. They've managed to lose all three of them. Good teams don't lose those games. It's just that simple. Nick Ferguson was just on last segment, and he specifically pointed out that a lot of these guys don't seem to be on the same page with the coaching staff. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing yet. That's concerning. This team had a 5-game preseason schedule. They've had more practice time before the season started than any other team in the NFL due to the Hall of Fame game start and the new coach. So you get a couple bonuses there in the spring. I understand it's a new coaching staff, but I think even the coaching staff would figure the entire offseason they'd have these guys understanding what they should be doing. And I think Nick is right. You have guys biting on things that they shouldn't bite. You have them not being able to disguise plays very well on defense. We knew about the struggle with the offense. We knew that Flacco was coming into Denver to help revitalize an offense. Wasn't expected to be explosive. It wasn't going to turn into the Manning-led Broncos during his first couple years in Denver, but it was supposed to at least be serviceable following Case Keenum. And it's just been about that. Serviceable. This team has scored 16 points, 14 points, and 16 points in 3 games. There you go. If you're scheming against the Denver Broncos, you say, look, we just got to get to about 19 and we win. That's not great. Not for a team that is supposed to be leading with defense. It's an enormous concern. Want to hear what you think about it on this Reaction Monday? RamosLaw.com text line is open. You can call or text us at 303-713-1043 like Dan did. Dan, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
It's a Monday, so, all right.
Where's Shaq Barrett?
Shaq Barrett is in Tampa Bay looking really good.
Why isn't he here?
Because the Broncos had outside linebackers, remember?
I don't know about that. That's what I thought, but I think that they could use him back now. I think we blew that one, a little bit.
I think you could play him inside and you'd be better than what you were getting. So, yeah, I think they may have misread that one as well. But that's the way it goes. I mean, Barrett is gone. You're going with Chubb. You're going with Miller. I think the funny thing is, and we can say we will, it's great that I'm delighted that Shaq Barrett, who's a good dude, CSU Ram, he was good here. I'm glad he's going great. I'm glad he's getting the recognition he deserves. I'm glad he's playing well. I will say this. All 32 teams would have said, out of 3 outside linebackers, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, and Shaq Barrett, you can keep 2. Every single team in the NFL would have kept the 2 Denver did. All of them.
Well, they want him as a pass rushing end, I guess. He really isn't. He's not a replacement for those guys. He's just added to, he could have played outside linebacker slash in the pinch pass rush. That's how I kind of think about him. But just another question about the Broncos. Do you think Elway would have lasted this long if Mr. B was alive and one of his faculties and really running the show?
Yes,
or
because
he'd be gone by now?
I do, because he's John Elway. Yes, I do. It's just that simple. I think John Elway has done enough for the franchise. Look, this is Pat Bowlen. We remember this one's for John. It was a team win. That was the Denver Broncos' first Super Bowl win. Pat Bowlen literally circled it to one man. And not the man, by the way, who had 2,000 yards that year. I mean, yes, I think John O would still have the position, Dan, and I think that's something that This is one of the challenges, and we can get into this. We're going to get into this, I guarantee you, as not only the show, but the season goes along. John Elway holds a unique spot in Colorado sports history as the most significant athlete that's ever played here, period. I know there are other people you can make an argument for if you want to go all the way back to, say, like Jack Dempsey. Okay, I get it. But it's basically impossible to argue that it's Elway. It's the most significant athlete ever in the history of Denver sports, Colorado sports. Because of that, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and he's done a lot more good than bad for the Broncos, whether it's on the field as a player or, quite frankly, even in the front office. Talked about how at the beginning of the segment, your record says you are. Okay, that's fine. I understand he had Peyton Manning. I understand a lot of the free agents with the Broncos during that period signed to play with Peyton Manning. They didn't sign because, John Elway's the GM now. I definitely want to play for the GM because no one says I want to play for the GM. You can ask John Lynch, who's a really popular guy too. Nobody meets with John Lynch and goes, I'd really like to play with for John Lynch in the front office. Nobody does that. Players want to play with other players. That's in the NFL. It's in the NBA. It's in everything. But you look at the record since Elway took over. Look, it's fantastic. Last 2 seasons it hasn't been. It's probably not going to be this season. But it's still going to be pretty good on the whole, even with 3 bad years. And moreover, knowing John Elway's footprint, who wants to be the one who fires John Elway? Who won you a pair of Super Bowls as a player, another one as a GM, took you to another one. Remember, John Elway has lost 4, won 3, 7 Super Bowls in some capacity. John Elway as GM or player has taken your franchise to 7. The vast majority of NFL franchises don't have 7 Super Bowl appearances or even close.
They might not even have 1.
No. Now ask Kansas City how that's gone. As good as Kansas City been, that's the way it goes. Ask the Chargers how that's gone. You get a blip. So this is one of the challenges the Broncos are going to have. Now, I will say this. Most of what the Broncos' challenges are right now is the fact that poor drafts for years in a row have left this team rather barren in depth, and the only way to fix it was by going out into free agency to patch those holes. Well, that means the bill eventually becomes due, right? Instead of having guys that are making close to league minimum, small amounts of money to be your depth guys at worst, now you have to go out and overpay someone in the free agent market to come in and do the same job. Elway's been having to do that for a few years now. And that's why they're running into what we're seeing right now. It's why Joe Flacco had to be restructured. They needed to free up some money. It's like the Broncos have rung up too many credit card bills, and now they have to do some creative shuffling so they can get by every month. But in the last 2 drafts, I think John Elway has made a clear shift that's hard to miss. Now, is it going to happen immediately? No, but this is how you turn the ship around. It's not a little speedboat, it's an ocean liner. It takes a while to turn. So you want to look on the bright side? There's that. I think Elway is learning in real time. And I think we have 2 drafts of evidence that he's doing so. Are all the picks perfect? No. Would I have gone with the tight end in the first round? No. Would I have definitely not gone with the second best tight end at his same school? No. But we don't know. How good can Noah Fant be? How good should he be? Are you thinking already he's going to be a bust? You might be surprised at how low the bar is for rookie tight ends. I'll show you next.
Free play for Rodgers. He knows where to go with it. For Valdez-Scantling. In the end zone. It's a Packer touchdown. Lindsey, touchdown Broncos. A 15-play drive. And Lindsey did a lot of the work. Flacco on first down. And ball comes out. And that's a fumbled football. And it's still fumbled. The Broncos were on it. Now the Packers have it. But Wilkinson, the tackle, he got to it first and had it. They should celebrate. They came in, this defense tied for the top spot in takeaways in the early season. Aaron Jones slips one tackle, and he's into the end zone for another Packer touchdown. And that's lights out on the Broncos. Packers, as they chant, "Go Pack, go," to 3-0. The Broncos 0-3.
This is one of the cleanest games my jersey has ever looked. I took basically one shot. I hit the ground one time, so I'm ecstatic. I've been at this for a long time, and to go home with my body feeling this good is a credit to the offensive line for sure. I'm feeling really good, and I'm going to, probably have a little scotch and look at some Philly tape.
Well, evidently, they don't. That's clearly the catch. They don't. Wow, that Aaron Rodgers clip was sort of the audio equivalent of the Kermit the Frog sipping the tea meme on the internet.
Makes me hate him even more.
Oh, see,
he just bugs me.
I'm going to be totally honest. I wanted the Broncos to win that game, of course. That kind of passive aggressive smack talk, inject that into my veins. I love that. I do. That cracks me up.
It does.
I mean, you know what? Hey, you don't like it? Then get him dirty.
Yeah. If that was my quarterback, I'd probably enjoy it. Aaron Rodgers just bugs the crap out of me. I mean, his little mustache and when he takes his chin strap and puts it on the side of his helmet like Favre did. Oh, it just bugs me. Just put your chin strap on. Just leave it on.
You got some weird hang-ups.
Yeah, I don't know why that bugs me. It just does.
That's a weird one.
But Noah Fant kind of bugs me too.
Why?
It's because he's not doing nothing like we thought.
Really? Well, what'd you think he was going to do?
I knew he wasn't going to do nothing. But other people on the station decide, he's not doing what we thought he was going to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. I think Mark Schlereth said it too.
I have not seen anything from Noah Fant that was just rewind that moment. And, that's what I'm saying. Out of your first-round pick, I haven't seen a huge rewindable, this kid's going to be something special moment. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think that's fair, but at the same time, well, you did have to rewind that fumble yesterday. Make sure he really just got it plucked straight out of his hands, which he did. So, yikes. But the history for tight ends is remarkable. Think about this. Jason Witten, Rob Gronkowski, Jimmy Graham, who we saw yesterday, Antonio Gates, in their rookie seasons, all of them had fewer than 45 catches and 550 yards in their rookie season. All of them. Those guys all turned out okay, don't you think? I mean, I think they were all right. So when you look at what Noah Fant is doing, and right now Noah Fant on the season, we'll take away his one carry for -3 yards. But for receiver, he has 9 catches for 99 yards. And you go, okay, well, big deal. So what, right? Well, he's on pace for 48 catches, that means, right? That's better than all those guys I mentioned. All of them are going to set up shop in the Hall of Fame one day. O.J. Howard was the 19th overall pick a couple years ago and considered one of the best tight ends coming out of college in years, right? Started his year with 26 catches, or his career last year, 2017, 26 catches, 432 yards. That's all they got. Noah Fant is already on pace for 48 catches, 528 yards. That's better than Witten, Gronkowski, Graham, Gates, and Howard, all in their first year. I mean, it's not really that bad. I don't know what folks necessarily expected. In the last 15 seasons, only 2 rookie tight ends had more than 600 yards receiving. 2. It was Evan Ingram had 722 last year. John Carlson in 2008 with the Seahawks got 627. The last 15 seasons. If Fant goes up 10 yards a game on average in receiving, he'll be better than Carlson and closing in on Ingram in yards. That's it. Be pretty close. The best seasons by tight ends in history. History. To get an idea how good Mike Ditka was. I think you already pretty much knew, but he still holds the records for receiving yards by a rookie tight end with 1,076 and 12 touchdowns. But Ditka's an anomaly. After that, it's Jeremy Shockey, who had 894 yards and 2 touchdowns. Beyond that, nobody. John Mackey in 63, but you're talking about since the merger. Mackey had 7 touchdowns. Since the merger, you haven't had a rookie tight end with more than 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, with the exception of only a few guys. That'd be Charlie Young of the Eagles in 73. We mentioned Ingram. Cam Cleveland of the Saints in 98. Russ Francis in 75. And Ken Dilger of the Colts in 95. You'll notice not all of those guys are Hall of Famers either. But here's the deal. The truth of the matter is, if you're looking by statistical accomplishments, Fant's not actually doing that bad. The fumble was bad. I don't blame him for the run, but he's been targeted 11 times and caught it 9 times. His average of 11 yards per reception is more than Emmanuel Sanders.
Sean, let me ask you this. If he was supposed to be this great threat around the end zone, how come they don't even throw to him in the red zone?
Well, 1, they're not in the red zone very often.
That's true.
2, you're likely to go to either ginormous Cortland Sutton or obviously a favorite target for Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco has 2 touchdowns. Guess who they've both gone to?
Emmanuel
Sanders, who wants the veteran.
I mean, have they even gone to Cortland Sutton in the red zone? I can't even remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, they haven't been down there too often is the trick. But we talked about it earlier. Sutton and Sanders were not only the only receivers to get a catch, they were the only receivers to even get a target. So I get that everyone wanted something spectacular out of Noah Fant. I get it, because you're a first-round draft pick and you think, oh, it's going to be big. But the expectation for a tight end needs to be vastly different. I mean, we're talking about a lot of history here. And it's not very explosive. TJ Hawkinson, right? Hawkinson 2 weeks ago exploded at a big game, and everyone's went over the moon about, oh my gosh, he's going to be amazing, and he looks great. He does look great. Noah Fant was Hawkinson's backup at Iowa. Hawkinson, even after that big game, has 8 catches for 139 yards. He's averaging 46 yards per game receiving. Noah Fant's averaging 33. Matt Stafford throws for 5,000 yards a year when he rolls out of bed. So it's a much more explosive passing offense. And yet Hawkinson, higher pick, better regarded, everything else, even with a huge game, is averaging about a dozen more yards a game than Fant. And the Broncos have a bad line that's in flux. And right now don't seem like they have a unified offensive scheme. So I understand when people look at Noah Fant's raw stats or his single plays and say, yep, wow, they really messed up. But at the same time, you have to look at this historically and be fair. If he were to pick up the pace, right? You have 13 more games left. If he gets 10 more yards per game on average, that means he's only averaging 43 yards a game. 43 yards a game. He'll be 8th all-time on the rookie receiving tight end list. 8th in history. The numbers that tight ends put up in their first year are not very impressive. I would argue if he ends up in that top 10 of all time as a rookie, which he very well might, pretty hard to say he's a bust, isn't it? Especially after 3 games. He's literally on pace to be in the top dozen right now. So I get the frustration, but we got to get a little perspective here. Guys who have 700 yards as rookies, that's crazy.
And if Flacco's getting him the ball a little more, I mean, Flacco's only had Max Williams in 2015 catch 30 or more passes as a rookie tight end.
He's already got 9 from Flacco.
So
Flacco's clearly looking his way.
But that's the thing. Flacco usually doesn't look at rookie tight ends.
Right, and he is now. So I think it's way too early here to look at Noah Fant and say, wow, bad pick. Now, if you want to argue they should have picked Devin White or Devin Bush, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. But you know whose fault that isn't? Noah Fant's. Not Noah Fant's fault he got picked there. All he can do is what he can do. And what he's doing is actually, historically for rookie tight ends, looking pretty good on an offense, by the way, again, that hasn't scored more than 16 points yet. Yikes. There is obviously a lot to break down. Want to hear what you think. RamosLaw.com. Text line 303-713-1043. You can call it or text it. We'll talk about that next. The Broncos are 0-3, and now people are wondering if Von Miller is a fit for Vic Fangio's defense, for his scheme. Well, he is, but it's more complicated than that. Part of the Broncos' challenge on defense is that they still are lacking not only overall talent on the inside linebacker position, but even though you have a sure tackler there in Todd Davis, who's a veteran, who I think is a little underrated. He's a pretty good player, but he's not fast. The Broncos don't have significant foot speed at that position. The main knock on Josie Jewell coming out of college was that he was slow. Not that he wasn't smart, not that he wasn't a sure tackler. He was phenomenal coming out of college. But everyone knew he was going to be a little slow. He's not a speedy player. Todd Davis isn't either. We're going to use the crystal ball and look way into the future here. And Nick Ferguson was on earlier. He talked about that as well. The way that the league is going, the average depth of target, which is the intended spot that the quarterback wants to throw, the average depth of target is shrinking all the time. Teams are always going shorter and shorter, quicker and quicker. The plan is to make sure that you as an offense do not make an error, do not make a costly turnover. You keep the clock going and you move the chains. You just do it bits at a time. You're not generally trying to rip off huge chunks of yardage. Now, certain teams can. The Chiefs certainly can because they've built a fleet of rocket-powered receivers because they have a guy whose arm is as strong as anybody I've ever seen. Literally. I mean, we're talking Favre Elway type arm here on Patrick Mahomes. He's got that kind of rifle. But by and large, most teams are going to these very short, dink and dunk, high percentage passes. It's been going that way for 30 years. You talk about the Shanahan offense, which is basically an offshoot of the West Coast offense from Bill Walsh back in the 80s. Ever since then, that's what this has become. It's been about efficiency, not making those game-breaking mistakes. Because of that, you're going to have a lot of short passes over the middle if you can't stay on the tight end or the running back or hit those quick wide receiver slants. The Broncos, because they do not have a lot of speed at inside linebacker, are especially vulnerable to those plays. We know about the problems with tight ends. Where do most tight ends immediately operate? In the middle of the field, right? You have the slant routes. Where do they end up getting thrown to? The middle of the field. The quick play action where you fake the handoff and then kind of flip it out to the fullback ends up near the middle of the field in a lot of cases. Think of the Josh Jacobs catch in the first game against the Raiders, where he then broke 4 different tackles and Adam Gotsis had to run him down from the D-line. We saw it in this game with Josie Jewell biting a little bit on a fake. And as you expect, I mean, look, this is, Aaron Rodgers you're going against. Danny Vitale sneaks out and gets a 27-yard gain on a dump-off. A lot of the consternation that people have about what's Von Miller doing, where is his stats? And Von Miller, by the way, has 8 quarterback hurries. Chubb has 3 quarterback hits on the year and only 1 hurry. These aren't necessarily official stats. They have to be they're sort of tracked a little differently. But if you allow the opportunity for an offense to do the quick hitters over the middle, and you've watched it, I assume if you're listening to this program, you've watched those games and you've seen the Broncos get picked to shreds right over the middle of the field from between about 3 and 9 yards. Right? Well, those happen so quickly. How long does it take a guy to get 5 yards down the field? Not very, right? Think someone can get 5 yards down the field faster than Von Miller can get all the way around the outside of a guy blocking him? Yeah, he can. This is the problem. It's not necessarily the scheme. I do think, using a crystal ball, 20 years from now, zone as we see it today is going to be used either very differently or be close to out of the game because today's quarterbacks, just think about it. You're a quarterback, right? You know you're supposed to complete short, quick passes. That's your scheme. You can recognize very quickly after the snap, as long as you've had some experience, whether a team is playing zone or playing man-to-man. Now, someone like an Aaron Rodgers has seen every zone created. He's going to pick it out faster than most. But even someone like Derek Carr has played long enough, he's seen them all. He, however, unlike your defense, knows where his receivers are all going. He knows where all their routes are going. So if he spots the zone, and if he has the time, he can wait for his receiver to come open. The challenges with that is at the very least, you could say to someone like a Chris Harris Jr., all right, we need you to take player X out of the game. Now, he's not always going to be able to do it. A good quarterback, a good receiver, they're going to get theirs. Don't get me wrong. But you can't have a quarterback necessarily just feel comfortable. If I manage to do this, he'll come open. Well, no. But if you want to get a ball to your favorite receiver and your quarterback, you just know if they're playing in zone, if you just have enough time, you'll be able to hit the window. So you do call it shorter. You do go ahead and know that the Broncos just don't have the personnel to probably hang with you in the middle. You just dump it off. And now Von Miller, great as he is, just doesn't have the time to get there. I don't look at Von in these games and think he's lost a step. I don't think he has. But teams understand now on a defense that prefers, basically is a base zone defense as opposed to a base man defense like you would have seen under Wade Phillips. Quarterbacks know how to take that apart. I worry at times, are the Broncos going to a scheme which is slowly but surely becoming somewhat obsolete? And what is Chris Harris Jr.'s best skill? Man-to-man coverage, specifically in the slot, right? Oh, you're playing zone. Thing that makes Chris Harris special, you're not utilizing it as often as you could. Same thing with Von Miller. Because of the way this works, you're putting so much leverage on the middle of the field where you have probably your weakest defensive unit. Shouldn't say probably. Definitely your weakest defensive unit. And that makes it impossible for Von Miller to do what he does best. It's not that the scheme is wrong. It's not that Von Miller's not fit for the scheme. But it's that the Broncos may not have the personnel to run it the way they'd like it to be run because they cannot create any consistent pressure up the middle, which makes the quarterback have to either back up or roll out right into the arms of Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. How many times have you seen a quarterback have to roll out against the Broncos in the first 3 weeks when they didn't want to? You can count it on one hand. That's why they don't have sacks. What would you do on defense? For the Broncos, might be a little late to change the scheme. What does that mean for the rest of the season and defense? What does it mean against Gardner Minshew? Explain that next. That was less than ideal, wasn't it? Broncos fall 27-16 in a game where, look, they had a chance. You lose by 11 points in a game where you had 3 turnovers. And the other team had no turnovers. Well, you can talk about whatever you'd like, but that was the game. They had a chance in that one. Wanted to go to the RamosLaw.com text line. You can always call or text us on that. That's 303-713-1043. Talk to Mark, who had some ideas about the defense. Mark, how are you?
Good. Thanks for taking my call. So I guess I got 2 points, one on offense, one on defense.
Sure.
And they kind of play into each other. One reason I wasn't a big Joe Flacco fan was what you're seeing in the NFL, which is kind of an adaptation of the college football game. And this weekend, it was pretty amazing to watch all these young rookie or second-year quarterbacks out of in the NFL this weekend win with their legs. And that ability to run, not a lot, but just that ability really puts off a defense because you've got to account for that other person. And that screws things up from a defensive perspective. When I look at the defense, though, when I look at Chubb and Von Miller, who I personally don't understand why he drops back into coverage ever, I don't know why they don't play a 4-3. Chubb is at his best when he's got his 3 technique, finger in the dirt, and just revs it up. And I was watching the game. I haven't watched it again, but I saw Von Miller cut inside and Aaron Rodgers broke containment multiple times, and that's what will kill you. I would love to see a traditional 4-3, or better yet, I'm an Iowa Hawkeye alum, and they've actually gone to a hybrid. It's a 4-2-5, and that third person is a crossover safety that's converted into kind of a linebacker.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Mark. You're exactly. I know it exactly. It's sub packages. That's what the Broncos actually hoped they would get out of Sua Cravens, and then tried to do it with Jamal Carter in the preseason as well, that sub linebacker spot. But a lot of this is very difficult to change on the fly. I see what you're getting at. The funny thing is, when teams are with the 3-4, and who know, the idea of how often they're in it varies so dramatically. But the idea behind the 3-4, one of the most popular ideas, is because you can then basically blitz somebody from any of those 4 spots, right? And without giving up too many holes in your defense. That's at least the idea. That's how Wade Phillips used it. So the heat was coming from somewhere, but the quarterback didn't know where the heat was coming from. So in that case, that makes some more sense. But the Broncos really don't blitz all that often. Fangio doesn't actually blitz all that often, which is great if you can get pressure. But if you can't get pressure with your line, well, you have a real problem. And that's the challenge for the Broncos at this point. Derek Wolfe's injury, and you don't know the severity of it, but I'd be surprised if he plays this week, makes it even more difficult. So I get it, and it's almost, the problem is it's almost impossible at this stage to be like, yep, you know what? All this stuff Joe Woods did, we dumped it. Now we've gone with everything that Vic Fangio does. Oh, let's dump it a few weeks in. It's just not going to happen. This is what the Broncos are going to run. This was the plan all year. This is what they picked up all the players that they did for. This is what they're going to run. Like it or not, this is the deal. But it really is, it's a bit of a collapse, quite frankly. The Broncos defense does not look all that great. The Broncos offense does not generate very many points. And now they've started adding turnovers to the equation. That's what in computer programming they call a cascade failure. One thing broke, and then that means the next thing broke, and then the next thing broke, and now that broke 4 things, and now nothing works. So that's the problem that the Broncos are dealing with. And for a defense that is built on chasing the quarterback down and pressuring the quarterback, this is a major concern because they are going to be really tight and upset. I mean, that's just the truth. Aaron Rodgers took the opportunity to twist the knife. We played that a little earlier. he's he's not new to the game. Basically said it was as easy a game as he's ever had physically. So that's the trick. Rodgers really didn't get knocked down. Neither did Mitchell Trubisky. Neither did Derek Carr. And we talk about the first time a team in its first 3 games have gone without a sack and a turnover since '82. Well, sacks were kept as a team statistic, not an individual statistic, back in '69. That's pre-merger. That's the last time a team went 3 games into a season without a sack and without forcing a turnover. 50 years. So there's plenty of blame to go around when your defense-centric team has done something no defense has done in 50 years. And it's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's a sign of ineptitude. I think the Broncos' defense on the whole is still pretty talented. But I've talked about this before. On offense in the NFL, your ceiling is defined by who your best player is. If you have Aaron Rodgers, if you have Tom Brady, you have no ceiling. You can be the best offense in the league. I don't even care who the rest of your players are. You have the potential to be the best offense in the league. Because on offense, you know what the play is. You get to control the ball. You get to control the pace. You get to control the play. So the best player on offense defines your ceiling. On defense, it's the exact opposite. The worst unit on offense defines your ceiling. For the Broncos, that's the inside linebackers. And this defense can only be as good as the inside linebackers are. And that's it. Because it's a breakdown of everything else. I understand Miller takes it on himself that he's got to find a way to get better and find a way to get a sack. Yeah. But unless you're going to find a way to install him some warp drive, they've got to get more pressure up the middle, or at the very least, make the quarterback have to look off his initial read up the middle. Until they can do either one of those things, the quarterback is consistently going to get rid of it before Von Miller and Bradley Chubb get to him. The whole time. So the idea that it's double teams, right? We've talked about how good a year Bradley Chubb could have because Von Miller's going to draw a lot of double teams. Bradley Chubb's going to be singled. I get it. The Packers line's good. Brian Bulaga and David Bakhtiari are really good. Good enough that pretty much all game long, they let him go solo against Chubb and Miller. They didn't double team him. Because they know now, 3 weeks in, they don't have to hold them that long. They just don't. They just have to basically do a little more than you do in college. Just a chip here and there, engage for just a second or two, and the ball's gone. And until the Broncos can force quarterbacks to hold on to the ball longer by getting better interior pressure or making sure that it's not an easy dump off over the middle or slant over the middle, this is what they're going to deal with all season long. Your ceiling in the NFL on defense is defined by the worst part of your defense, not the best part. If this was offense, you'd say, well, they have Von Miller. You're in great shape. It's not. It's defense. So your ceiling is not defined by Von Miller and Bradley Chubb and Chris Harris. It's defined by Todd Davis and Josie Jewell. As good as they can be is as good as the Broncos defense can be. And that's why if you want to talk about a Noah Fant and decide, I didn't like the draft pick, I don't think Fant's been a bust. I've given you the numbers. This early on, actually, Fant's been on pace to be one of the top dozen or so performing rookie tight ends in history when it comes to yardage and receptions. It's just that they didn't need a tight end like they needed an inside linebacker. Because if they would have picked Devin White or Devin Bush, now those guys, let's say it's Bush and Davis. Bush and Davis define the Broncos ceiling, not Jewell and Davis. And that's a bigger upgrade than Fant over Hireman or Fumagalli or whoever else you have. That's where the Broncos are. Vic Fangio talked to the assembled press, as you would have expect. A lot of interesting stuff after a third consecutive loss. We'll let you hear that next. Following the Broncos' loss to the Packers in Green Bay, Broncos coach Vic Fangio addressed the media at the UC Health Training Center out in Dove Valley. As you can imagine, there was a lot to talk about. Let's hear from the coach.
Coach, when your star wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders says that this team is in a world of suck, what is your response to that?
He was just repeating what I had said in the locker room after the game. So, and that's, I told him, I said, we're going to have to deal with everybody thinking we suck. And, and all of us, not just players, coaches, everybody, the whole organization. And we need to deal with that. And so he was basically just repeating what I had said.
How do you deal with that?
You just have a strong upper lip, look at the positives, realize what the negatives are, do your best to correct those negatives, and know who you are as a person, as a team, and as a player and as a coach. We've all had some success at different degrees throughout our careers, even the players, the young ones, us as coaches, and we've got to just stick to it and get through the hard times.
What's a moment of adversity that you coached through?
Say it again.
A moment of adversity in your coaching career that you've been in that you've gotten through with that accident?
There's been several. I can't, think of one offhand, really. But, anytime you've been in this league 30-some years, it's not all a bed of roses. And you just fight through it. And the easiest thing to do is to just make wholesale changes, whether it be personnel, scheme, this, that, or the other thing. There's the old saying, if you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, that's not very smart. But there's also a saying, too, change for just change's sake isn't very smart either. So we've got to operate that fine line as a staff and realize what we're doing, is the mistakes we're making correctable, and then make a good, intelligent decision.
Do you believe you have the players you need to win, or do you believe the Broncos are essentially in a rebuilding stage?
No, we've got the players here to win. I believe in these players. I enjoy being around them every day. They're a bunch of good guys. They're trying their butts off. We just have to play a little bit better. And along with that, we have to coach better. If we're breaking down fundamentally in certain areas at critical times, that's an indictment on us as coaches, too, not just the players.
Through 3 weeks, are there things in particular that need you to always turn things around here?
Yeah, and when you say turn around, I'm just looking to get to this game. I'm not looking at the entire season. We just got to figure out a way to go out and play our best, cleanest game this week. And, yes, I do think we can.
After 3 losses, do you have to worry about guys pointing fingers or kind of the locker room and tensions and everything like that?
Well, I think, that's the landscape of the NFL. You guys help perpetuate that, too. And for us to just have our head in the sand and know that that may not happen would be bad on our part. So we have to talk about it. But I think we have the right kind of guys in here. And I think after we talk about it, I think everybody will move forward with the right frame of mind.
On some of Flacco's sacks, he had it for over 4 seconds yesterday. Do you want to throw it away, or was he waiting for something to open that didn't happen?
Well, everyone's a little different. Obviously on the early downs, meaning first and second down, throwing away would be advantageous, as long as you're throwing it away and it's an incompletion. On third down, if he's not sure, the extra 345-yard loss, if he's not sure that he can throw it away cleanly, really doesn't kill you that much. But, we've had a fair amount of sacks. But I don't think it's indicative of the way our O-line has been playing. Some sacks are caused by routes, too, not being cleanly run, or the defense jamming up a route. So each and every one has its own story. But overall, I think the offensive line, has not been perfect, but has done a pretty decent job.
Garrett in particular, how did you see him respond?
Good. He didn't get called for any holding penalties, which I know you were all waiting for. And it seemed there wasn't many called in the game. I think there was only one called in the game. They may have gotten that same stat that you gave me last week. It'd be interesting to see. I'm going to put you in charge of that. How many offensive holding penalties were called this past week in the NFL?
Three, Coach. You went down from 5.6 the first 2 weeks to 3 across the league.
That's pretty significant. So, those guys in New York, they're influenced by you guys. So, but he played a cleaner game, to his credit, not just maybe the league told those guys to keep it in a little more.
Coach, Wolf and Jewell were injured like the game.
Yeah, we don't have a full amount of information on that yet. Those guys are right now getting evaluated. Both of those guys you mentioned are in the process of getting an MRI. So the MRI is the magic wand these days. You got to wait for that.
Coach, 3 games now without a sack or a takeaway. How do you buck this trend?
Just keep grinding away. All of these games have had kind of a similar type personality to them. And, the teams are trying to avoid us, particularly our outside rushers, of having an impact on the game. With throwing it quicker, running it more. We've been behind most of the time in all these games. And I think they're willing to accept that, until we can change it. And we've got to change it by playing better defense to where we can get into some more passing situations. We had some nice rush on a couple of the third downs yesterday, albeit they didn't result in sacks, but they did result in incompletion. So it's still there. That we've gone 3 games without one is highly unusual. I acknowledge that. But we've got to get better there.
Some people are actually now questioning Von Miller's fit in your defense. Is that even fair or right to do that?
Yeah, I don't think that's correct, because really he's playing basically the same way he's played in his whole career.
When you say you don't want to make change for change sake, is it a harder sell on players to stay the course when they're not getting the results?
Oh, I think you just show them the video evidence of why you feel that way.
Is there a chance Janovich plays this week, and what would he bring to the NFL?
There is a chance he plays, but we'll see how he looks in practice. I don't ever want to put a guy out there that's not completely ready to play.
What would he bring to the offense if he can play?
Well, he'd bring a steadiness, I thought Beck went in there yesterday and his snaps did a nice job overall. But Andy's experience, his experience in this offense, he's an experienced fullback. Besides being a good fullback from a talent standpoint, he's experienced. And anytime you have a good combination of talent and experience, that's a good thing.
What was yesterday the right time to give Devontae Bosby a big opportunity, and how do you think he did?
He did fine. He had some really nice plays. Broke up a couple passes. He has some plays that he needs to fix. He had some plays that could potentially have been big plays for them, but they didn't find them. So he's got to correct them now that they're on tape. He could have tackled better in a couple instances, but overall he took advantage of his opportunity, and that's why we left him out there.
A few more for the coach. You mentioned only one hold, and then obviously a bit of a ticky-tack one. What did you see on the play? Is that maybe one of the 10 plays you'll turn in this week?
No, he held him.
Callahan, any update there?
Not yet.
Coach, after watching the last 3 games, is there anything about Joe Flacco's performance where you feel like you need to encourage him to be more aggressive and push the ball down the field?
Maybe a little bit, but not a lot. We took a couple shots yesterday. We hit the big one, the Cortland. We had another one that we caught, but it was out of bounds down there on their sideline. We had some more called, but it didn't develop, based upon what they were doing defensively. So, probably, but, we have been to a degree, too.
How did Todd Davis do in his first game back?
I thought he did fine, considering the guy really hadn't done much since training camp started. And for him to go in there and play the amount of plays that he played, I think it was very commendable, and hopefully that will set him up to play even better moving forward.
Last one, when you were brought in, for warranted reasons, you were labeled a defensive guru. And I think people expected great defensive play right off the bat. Can you explain why it's hard when you're installing a new scheme, new coaches, some new players, why it's hard to get those results right away?
Well, it doesn't have to be hard. In this case, it has been. But I don't think we've played terrible, but we haven't played good enough to win. You know, and I know some of our stats may be okay when you look at them, but you know we've got to get more stops. Obviously, the takeaways are a big thing that we're not getting, which would help our offense. I know I'm not really answering your question, but it doesn't have to be. We expect more, as the players expect more, and we expect more as the coaches.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Okay.
That is Vic Fangio, obviously a bit defensive, understandably, I guess, after an 0-3 start that nobody expected. Talked about how he thought the offensive line had been playing pretty well. The stats, they say otherwise, and there's a common denominator there that you'll find very interesting next.
3rd and 10. Flacco has time. Can't find anybody, and he's going to go down. Well, he had time to get rid of it, but Preston Smith eventually brought him down for the sack.
Vic Fangio talked about how he thought the Broncos' offensive line has played pretty well, better than most people, I guess, are giving him credit for. And look, I understand that there's an idea to circle the wagons a bit. I get it. And I understand that there are certain games that are worse than others. And this was one of them. Joe Flacco was sacked 6 times yesterday. But to give you an idea, and you let me know, RamosLaw.com text line. You can call or text 303-713-1043. But to give you an idea, kind of added all these things up, went and tracked the stats, did a little bit of math. Here you go. So the Broncos have allowed 11 sacks in their first 3 games. You can do the math. That's 3.7 a game, or almost 4 per game. That's tied for the 6th worst in the league with 2 other teams. If you take those 8 teams, the top 5, and the 3 teams, including the Broncos, who are tied at 6, that includes 4 of the 6 0-3 teams in the league, and the combined winning percentage of the teams that have allowed 11 or more sacks in 3 games gives you a winning percentage of 18.8%. 4, 19, and 1. 2 of those 4 wins, by the way, are from the Houston Texans, the only team in the top 8 that surrendered that many sacks that has a winning record. In a passing league, there's a clear correlation between keeping your quarterback ambulatory and having a chance to win. Aaron Rodgers referred to it. And I don't know, Kevin Kistner in the booth. Do you have that sound handy from Rodgers? Because it was just amazing shade being thrown. And if you don't think that it's valuable to a quarterback to not find themselves on the ground, well, listen to a guy that might be the NFL's best.
This is one of the cleanest games my jersey has ever looked. I took basically 1 shot. I hit the ground 1 time, so I'm ecstatic. I've been at this for a long time, and to go home with my body feeling this good is a credit to the offensive line for sure. I'm feeling really good, and I'm going to, probably have a little scotch and look at some Philly tape.
So there you go. You understand how important it is. And it's not about, and I've talked about this for years, it's not about just sacks. It's not. It's about pressures. So if you're getting a tremendous amount of pressures, that's okay. I get that. Von Miller and Bradley Chubb have a combined 14 pressures in the 3 games. Miller has 8 hurries, Chubb with 1 hurry, and 5 different quarterback hits. Miller hasn't gotten one of those yet. But when you're talking about your quarterback being sacked an average of 4 times a game, you can take it from Aaron Rodgers, a dude that's pretty tough, by the way, who's taken some shots and keeps coming back. You can tell right there how valuable it is for him to not take those hits. The Broncos are allowing Joe Flacco to take a lot of them. He's not a mobile guy. He's also on the wrong side of 30. You're taking some risks there. You think the Broncos are 0-3 now, but playing okay. Wait till Brandon Allen's the quarterback. You want to gamble with that? Let's go to the RamosLaw.com text line. Talk to Butch. Butch, how are you tonight?
Getting it on with Sean.
Yep. After
How's
another
it
loss, we got to stop meeting this way, Butch.
Yeah, I almost had it dead on. 26-13, I believe is what I said. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I was surprised, although, I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I think it's better to be the worst 3-0 team than the best 0-3 team, and I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at the best 0-3 team. Like to touch on Von Miller. Overall, defensively, as far as points given up, if you look at the game yesterday, you could easily minus 10 to 14 points. That was mostly given up by the offense, I mean, you give them the ball, after turnovers, goes more on the offense than the defense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of them was at the 5. The fumble was recovered at the 5-yard line.
So you minus that, that's 20 points. Most teams will take 20 points a game, and then you minus a field. I got to watch the game again, but a field goal or a touchdown on another turnover. Am I mistaken?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. So, which is amazing how few points this defense has really given up when you consider how bad they are at two things: getting to and/or sacking the quarterback, and giving up first possession drives for scores, particularly touchdown, has been an ongoing problem. It seems like 3 out of every 4 games they give up an opening drive for a touchdown and then figure things out. I mean, have you noticed that they give up a lot of first drive touchdowns and then seem to adjust later? As far as Von Miller, I wanted to touch on this. I got it narrowed down to 2 things, and that's why I'm calling you to see if there's a third. It's either lack of effort or he's just past his prime. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if you look at the better the player, it seems like the bigger and the quicker the drop-off. You can look at Jerry Rice, went from one of the best receivers of all time to not even being able to make a practice squad. You look at Champ Bailey. I don't care what anyone says. He was horrible his last 3 years. Not bad, horrible, particularly his last 2 years. And I know Von Miller's not that old, but is there a third? I mean, because I got it to either he's just not as good as he used to be or lack of effort, because I'm really getting sick and tired of this getting rid of the ball quick excuse. That may fly out. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Butch. But I see what you're saying. And thank you for the call. But look, it's not lack of effort. It's not lack of effort. Is it possible that he's a step slower? Yes, it is. I don't know that he really is, but it's possible. Can't rule it out. But the getting rid of the ball early is not necessarily an excuse. What it is it's very good scheming by offenses, by the way, that understand that they're limited. The Broncos have lost to 3 teams, and I would argue that this is the least explosive Packers offense I've seen in a long time. Rodgers doesn't really look like the same guy that you've seen over the years. The Bears aren't exactly explosive. Behind Mitchell Trubisky, they have some talented players. Some guys that are explosive. Robinson is explosive. You saw tonight, Taylor Gabriel can be explosive. We know Tariq Cohen's explosive, but Trubisky really isn't, and they don't play that kind of offense yet. And the Raiders? Well, the Raiders weren't even good last year, and they didn't exactly look like world beaters in game 1 either. But they do understand that if they're going to lose, they're not going to lose and give Von Miller free shots at the quarterback. No, it's not all scheme. Certainly, Miller has to find a way to fight through it, and he's talked about it. He talked about it again after the game yesterday. And it's possible, I guess, he's a step slower. But to me, this is teams understanding that the Broncos' defense is a donut. It has a big hole in the middle, and that's where they're going to continue to attack. They're either going to go to the inside, occasionally go over the top when you have to draw in to cover the inside, or when you try to move back into the inside to help it, to shore it out. You've seen Miller kind of cut to the inside here and there. Well, then they're going to dump it off to a running back. The Broncos, quite frankly, with the way their defensive roster is comprised, are too easy to scheme against. There's really no other way to say this. Can't dance around it. That's the fact. I mean, I understand that Miller's the guy getting all the flack. Bradley Chubb doesn't have a sack either. He's not past his prime. Now, I think he's looked a little better than Miller in these first couple games, but I don't think it's light years better. Teams have learned how to attack the Broncos. And these aren't teams with incredibly skilled and diverse offenses. Not yet. You'll face them soon enough. The Broncos have the 3rd hardest schedule in the league with their remaining 13 games. They better get it right, and they better get it right quick. Now, that hole in the middle, whose fault is it? I have some ideas. Text line certainly has some ideas. So did Mike Evans this morning. We'll hear from him next.
times are rough around here. You know, obviously, in the past 3 years, it's been tough. You know, so trying to get it right. Right now, it's in 0-3. Living in a world of suck.
That was actually the name of one of my college cover bands. It's a good name. It's Emmanuel Sanders, of course, commenting on the Broncos' 0-3 start. Sanders had a rough game of it as well against the Packers. 2 catches for 10 yards. He'd been very, very good up until that point and then just could not get anything going against the Packers. Broncos had a very interesting selection of passes. Flacco, 20 for 29, 213, no touchdowns to pick, 6 sacks. That one's a little bit rough, but oddly, didn't go to wide receivers much at all. Some of that might have been the minimal time he had to pass, but only Cortland Sutton and Sanders even got targets, let alone catches. No other wide receivers were even thrown to. Noah Fant, 3 catches for 37 yards. Of course, one of them ended in a disastrous fumble. Jeff Hireman, 2 for 20. And even Andrew Beck got a target, but no other receivers. Kind of an interesting situation. Now, the idea is, where are the Broncos now? The Broncos are facing 0-4 in the face. Last time that happened was 1999 when they started 0-4. That's not great. So you're getting into a really, really bad start by a lot of the places who do those sort of things. Your Football Outsiders, they have the Broncos at a 4.6 chance of making the postseason and a 6.2% chance of having the top pick, which is supremely impressive because the Dolphins are tanking. And you now have better odds at having the top pick than making the playoffs? Oof. Scooby-Doo used to say, "Ruh-roh." Broncos have a 44% chance at a top 5 selection at this point, given all the number crunchers who do that. So it's pretty dire straits the Broncos find themselves in. And you'd think originally, okay, great, it's a game against Jacksonville at home. Well, you gotta like that. Jacksonville's still only 1-2, but they're trending up, suffice it to say. We'll get into the game over the course of the week, but the Broncos are in a bad spot. They don't have depth. They don't have depth because of a series of very, very bad drafts, which have just been spun around in the last couple of seasons. And looking at the Ramos.com text line, I do read all of them. It's kind of funny. I talked about how I thought that Elway's bad drafts over a 5-year span in particular really put the Broncos behind the 8 ball, but I said that it's clearly you could see a pivot. The last 2 drafts moved away from just getting athletes and started to get football players. And apparently that was enough from the 970692. Elway needs to go. Another from the 970. You are going crazy about Elway. We're not Cowboy fans and lives in the old days of a Super Bowl. Shows the record that his draft choices and decisions shadow his Super Bowls. Okay. And then another from the 970, my favorite. Elway is paying you well. Well, I mean, I guess I wish. It'd be nice. I wouldn't mind it.
You're getting paid by Elway?
No. But I'm available, though. I mean,
I mean, if you are, I want it.
I mean, they have my number.
Yeah.
In case. But, yeah, if I was, I probably wouldn't be very for much longer, as I complained that the 5 years of atrocious drafting put the Broncos behind the 8 ball. Not the only person that really feels that way. Mike Evans, morning show, Mike Evans and Mark Schlereth talked about that this morning, and, well, Mike pulled no punches.
90% of this is on John in the front office because since coming off the Super Bowl and starting 4-0, since that 4-0 start, they finished that year 5-7. That was with Gary Kubiak and his staff. Then it was 5-11 and 6-10 with Vance Joseph and his staff. Now it's 0-3 with Vic Fangio and his staff. all the quarterbacks that came through during that time.
Right.
They are 16-31 in their last 47 games. Think about it. Since winning the Super Bowl and starting 4-0, they are 16-31. That's not just some phase. I mean, that is a pattern. That is 47 games of football, and you've only won 16. All kinds of coaches, all kinds of coordinators, all kinds of quarterbacks. What's the one constant? Of course, this is John Elway's fault. Now, here's the question. Are we witnessing something that is finally bottoming out, that it's a byproduct of all those personnel failings, and it's bottoming out, but there's hope that it's ready to swing back the other direction? Or are we bottoming out with really no end in sight? Because depending on how you feel about that depends on how you feel about John Elway. If you feel like, all right, we're experiencing the worst of it, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel, then you're probably okay with the idea of John fixing this thing. But if you're of the opinion that, you know what, this thing's 0-3, and we may not have bottomed out yet, well, then you got to make a change. Drastic, sweeping changes have to be made.
That's Mike Evans. His voice is a little under the weather there, and when I get a little bit of laryngitis or something, I end up sounding like Cookie Monster, and no one wants me to be on the radio at all. Mike does it, and he sounds all smooth. That's amazing. That said, I wasn't aware he was sick, and I'm gonna wipe down this mic pretty good during the commercial break. Now, again, nobody wants me to sound like Cookie Monster. Not for 3 hours solo. You don't. I mean, it's funny, for one thing or two, but not for 3 hours solo. Look, Mike brings up great points, and this is what I've talked about before. You look at the drafts specifically between 2013 and 2016, and by and large, they're disastrous. They're absolute disasters. There's no other way to put it. There's not a single guy from the 2013 draft that is not on the Broncos. None of them are even in the league. All of them. That's only 6 years ago. Everybody's gone. 2014, Bradley Roby, Cody Latimer, Michael Schofield. None of them are playing here. Bradley Roby, the best he could get was a 1-year deal. Schofield was a disaster. Cody Latimer is on the Giants because the Giants have nobody but Sterling Shepard. They also have Benny Fowler, mind you. 2015, Shane Ray. Broncos wouldn't even pick up his option. Ty Sombrilo. Nope. Couldn't block anywhere. Jeff Hireman's still on the team. Obviously, the injuries have been a major problem, but he's still on the team. Max Garcia, nope. Best player from that draft was Trevor Siemian in 2015, and it's not even close. Nor is he on the team. 2016, of course, headlined by Paxton Lynch. Yeah, I know you got Justin Simmons in the third. I get it. You got Andy Janovich. You got Will Parks. I get it. But when you blow your first-round pick, it's 2016. This was 3 years ago. Your first-round pick, you traded up to get him. He's out of the league. This is why you don't have depth. 2017 picks Garrett Bowles instead of Ryan Ramczyk. Right idea. Needed a tackle. Picked the wrong one. You just picked the athlete. Not a very good tackle. You had his coach last week basically saying maybe he doesn't know what a legal block is. Yikes. DeMarcus Walker was your number 2. He hasn't made a dent. Carlos Henderson, Brendan Langley out of the league. Now started to flip it around, 2019. This is where I guess I give Elway some credit and people get angry about it. Last 2 years have been very different drafts than the others. He's gone and gotten guys that were multiple-year performers, captains, guys who got the job done. That's different than what he's doing now than what he did then. That does matter. We get a chance to talk to 104 Through the Fans, Nick Ferguson. Nick had a few opinions here about what was going on with the Broncos. Remember, Nick, and love his optimism. Thought the Broncos would go 12-4. Hasn't happened. He'll explain why. Next.
It's a Reaction Monday, presented by First Bank. Here's the Fan Late Night with Sean Drotar.
Well, let's get right to it. The Broncos are 0-3. They haven't been completely out of these games, but at a certain point, like Bill Parcells famously said, "You are what your record says you are." Joining us now is 104.3 The Fan's Nick Ferguson. Follow him at NickFerguson_25 on Twitter, where he's all afternoon and evening has been in some really interesting film breakdowns. How are you doing tonight, Nick?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay, and let me start with this, and I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here because we had a lot of us guess these sort of things. You had the Broncos coming out this season at 12-4. I think we understand they're probably not going 12-1 the rest of the way, but I was even less bullish. I had them at 7-9, and I'm having a difficult time trying to figure out how they go 7-6 the rest of the way. What did you expect to see from the Broncos that you have not seen yet this season?
Well, my 12-4 prediction was a prediction that was well, thought out. I went through the schedule game by game and broke it down into quarters, and I was expecting to see a defense that was going to be a dominating force. The pieces were already there in place with having a bookends, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, and looking at what Coach Fangio had with the Chicago Bears, and I felt at the time, Sean, that this Broncos defense collectively was better than the Chicago's Bears defense on paper. Now, it was a matter of execution, and I know, and rightfully so, I've taken some flack about the 12-4 prediction, and as to what were you thinking, how preposterous, and what were you drinking at that time. But it was a logical assessment on this team based on knowing what Fangio was able to do, having a competent quarterback in Joe Flacco, something that the team hasn't had in a couple of years. I just kind of thought, it was going to be a gumbo of different ingredients, and the recipe was going to be winning some football games. And the games that the Broncos have been in thus far this season, these were all games that were winnable games. You look at the Packers game, and you look at the way that they actually scored points. There were two drives that Aaron Rodgers actually went down and made some quality plays, but the Broncos, we helped them. We turned the ball over. There were 6 sacks. When you do that, it's hard to win. And right now, Sean, it's hard for this team, knowing as though they lack a lot of depth. They're not as talented as I anticipated. They cannot win close games because they make so many mistakes. And when you don't have that talent, you cannot commit penalties in key situations and take points off the board. So I'm not going to, somewhat backtrack from my prediction. It was what it was. But what I'm seeing right now is not indicative of what I thought. Josie Jewell is not an every down linebacker. He finds himself in difficult situations because he seems to not understand man coverage, where you need to place your body, and zone coverages, how far you need to drop back in coverage. And it just takes me back, Sean, to the beginning where we started with the draft. There was a guy in Devin Bush and Devin White that were there for the Broncos to take, but they decided to take Noah Fant. And the baffling part about it is you took Fant with the number 1 overall pick for the Broncos, but you're not using him and by flexing him out like, Andy Reid does with Travis Kelce. So I'm left pulling my hair out.
You bring that up, and let's go to that offensive side. Not only were Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders the only 2 wide receivers to catch a pass yesterday, they were the only 2 that even got targeted. Juwan Winfrey was active, didn't get a look. Deshaun Hamilton did not get a look. Nobody even got a look except for Sutton and Sanders on the outside. And then, like you're saying, Fant got 3, but this was dink and dunk kind of stuff. There really wasn't any aggressiveness to the offense. And truthfully, that seems to have been something that's a common denominator in all 3 of these first games.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I always go back in these situations to the play calling. What is being dialed up to get these players involved in the game? Philip Lindsay was a guy who really lit a spark and was the only spark for me in the loss against the Green Bay Packers. And it was finding ways to get him on the one-on-one matchups, get him out of space. A couple of times we saw both Royce Freeman and Lindsay, on the field at the same time, something I felt that Gangarello should have gone to earlier in the season. I know we're still 3 weeks in, and most people said, we're still early in the season. But You had 2 games prior to the game on Sunday to get those guys involved. And Sutton, a guy who came in training camp, and he had a case of the drops, he showed a great amount of maturity in the past couple of games. He had one play where he was downfield, he ran and just blew up a Packers defender, and that's something that we didn't really see from, Cortland Sutton last season. But, Scangarello has weapons. We've seen and we continue to see the few teams that run this style of offense, they struggle at times, but they find a way from an offensive coordinator standpoint to feature their skilled players. We still have yet to see this. I would like to see a little more creativity, a la maybe a Josh McDaniels or Sean McVay, getting your players in bunt situations. That's kind of like a cluster situation close to the line of scrimmage, or maybe a wide cluster to kind of create spacing for the route so Joe Flacco can hit these guys on time, on rhythm. But we are not seeing that, and I have no idea why we haven't seen an evolution in this offense yet.
Let's go over to the defensive side, too. We know that the Broncos are the first team since at least 1982 when sacks were recorded as an official statistic to have no sacks and no turnovers in their first 3 games of the season. This was a defense that was designed to do both of those things. How much of this do you look at it as scheme? I noticed earlier today on Twitter you were showing how there was a little more luck with man-to-man coverage. You were showing some other games and how that works. The Broncos have a lot of their top players. We're here from the Wade Phillips era, the see ball, get ball. Now you're going with a defense that is more of a zone base. Obviously, nobody plays just zone, just man-to-man. I get all that. But some of the Broncos players seem like they're just maybe a little more comfortable in a man-to-man setting, and this does not seem to me. You played. You're going to be better at it than I am. To be a great fit for the athletes that they have on this team.
Well, with the athletes that you have on this team, you have to run a mixture of coverages. You cannot be married to one thing. You cannot be married like Joe Woods was to calling all man for 60 minutes. You cannot be married to just calling zone coverage for 60 minutes. And here's where individuals kind of mistaken man and zone coverage. If you're going to play man-to-man coverage, you make the windows tighter for the quarterback and force him to make a great decision. His ball placement and timing has to be on. But the problem with playing man-to-man a lot is that your corners and your nickel guys and sub packages, their backs are to the quarterback, so they can't see the quarterback. Now, the luxury and the joy of playing zone coverage, and why Fangio was hired, was that it allows your defenders to see the quarterback. The quarterback is the most important person because other than the official, he touches the ball on every single play. But the problem that we're seeing that the Broncos are having with the zone coverage is that it is predicated on being able to get pressure on the edge and in the interior of the line between the 2 A-gaps. That's something that we haven't seen. And also, it forces guys in the back end to be smart, and they have to see routes and personnel as they come out of the huddle, as guys line up, as guys start to move. What I'm seeing is though is like these individual players that we have right now, especially at the linebacker position, is though they've never seen zone drops before. No one's ever talked to them about zone drops, and that is the crucial part when you play zone coverage. Every guy has to know what the other guy across from him or right next to him is doing. If you don't get to the right depth, it's a problem. It's no different than a wide receiver on the 3rd and 13, right? He cuts his route short but only runs it at 12. I mean, you have to run your route at 13. From guys from a defensive standpoint, I'm not seeing that. I mean, now with the blueprint being out on this team, throw short, quick passes, line up in the shotgun. You can run play action on the center. Von Miller and Chubb can't get there, and all you have to do is do what Aaron Rodgers did, use a hard count, quick count, a silent count, get those guys off sides, and then now you have a free play because the guys in the back end, they don't stay with their guys. And, Sean, I'll add this. On the play, I think it was the first quarter, it was 12 minutes and 24 seconds to go in the game. It was a shot down the field on Kareem Jackson and was Scantling, the receiver for the Green Bay Packers. The other problem with the Broncos secondary and defense collectively that's a little different from the Chicago Bears and what we saw tonight on Monday Night Football, they give the coverage away before the ball is even snapped. Go back and watch that play. Both Simmons and Parks rolled directly to the left side of the defense over Mercedes Lewis and the other Green Bay Packers tight end. Basically what they told Aaron Rodgers before the snap, throw the ball to the middle of the field because no one's standing there. You saw the same thing happen to Isaac Yiadom in the game against the Oakland Raiders at the start of the season. And I'm sitting wondering, what are they being taught? And are they able to take from the classroom and bring it to the field? Because it is disheartening what I am seeing as a former DB who played here and who coached for the Niners. I am baffled at to degree of what I'm watching on film.
He is Nick Ferguson. Make sure you catch him. He's all over the station here with 104.3 The Fan. Follow him on Twitter, Nick Ferguson _25. A lot of really great breakdowns on Twitter today with some video. Really handy way to get a little bit smarter at football. Thanks so much for your time tonight, Nick. Appreciate it. Looking forward to next time already.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Couple major injuries shaking up the NFL as well, namely the Giants, who are thrilled about having Daniel Jones in his performance, but Saquon Barkley out for a while. Also, one of the major contenders in the AFC loses a player for the season that you might not think of as a household name, but he's going to be missed. Next. Living on a prayer indeed. Kevin Kistner in the booth on, well, what used to be called ones and twos, but it's all digital now, so it's not like you're back there with turntables.
Unfortunately, thankfully, no.
Oh, okay.
Because I would have no clue.
You're young. You're like, you ever seen a record?
Yeah. We going vinyl?
Yeah, exactly. That's the things that that hipsters hang on their wall, right? Okay, yeah, I know what those are.
I mean, we got CD players back here, but
yeah,
I've only seen them used once.
Yeah, and it's probably just in the computer. It's not even for music. It's just for data, probably.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. You can follow Kevin, by the way, at Kistner Radio. I just found out, by the way, I feel like an idiot. I forgot. There's a PGA golfer named Kevin Kistner.
Yeah.
It's one slightly different spelling, only one S.
Yeah.
Uses two. But I mean, you have to have a favorite golfer, don't you, now?
Yeah. You know, people sometimes think that it's me. Which I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Sure.
I called some guy and I was trying to book a guest one time. And he's like, what was your name? I was like, Kevin Kistner. He goes, like the golfer? I was like, well, that's the first time I've heard that one. So, sort of, but just take off one S.
It's pronounced the same way.
Yeah.
That's all good.
It's weird when you're sitting at home watching Sports Center. You hear your name come up.
Yes, that's never happened to me in my life. I feel reasonably confident it never, ever will.
Have you ever, like, Facebooked your own name? See how many Sean Drotars are out there?
Yeah, once. I think there's only, like, one, but it's spelled different.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you are a one and only.
Well, I mean, probably not. There's like 7 billion people on the planet. But there's not a lot of them, put it that way.
Yeah, I feel you.
There's not a lot of them. Looking around the NFL, obviously, the Broncos 0-3 after losing to the Packers in Green Bay. They have yet, by the way, to ever win in Wisconsin. Just a little random factoid for you there. But it could be worse. It could be worse. The New York Giants, according to sources that have spoken to Adam Schefter, will lose Saquon Barkley to a high ankle sprain 4 to 8 weeks, and it was made very clear that the farther end of that is the likeliest outcome. In fact, the Giants are hoping that he can be back for Week 12 following their bye week in Week 11. Ouch. So that's a little rough for Daniel Jones, who just gets into the starting role, does pretty well, does really well, actually, and then shabam. So much for your running game. Although, truthfully, their backup Wayne Gallman is not bad. I'll give you a sneak preview of Cecil Lammy's fantasy football show tomorrow night. He's going to tell you to pick up Wayne Gallman because he's the guy for the next couple months. Tough break for the Giants. Of course, the Giants aren't really a playoff team. The New England Patriots, they are. Boy, are they. How many points have the Patriots allowed this year at this point? The grand total is 17.
Yeah, they're giving up 5 per game.
Yeah, a little over 5 a game.
Yes,
closer to 6.
Going into yesterday was 1.5 points per game.
You know, the funny part is that, I mean, yeah, it was 1.5 points. It's absolutely bonkers. They are tied, though, with the 3-0 Bills. I don't know how for real that will be.
Uh-oh.
Probably only right up until they play the Bills. But they did lose. The Patriots are one of the few teams that play a fullback straight up. That's how they've gotten that power running game going. Protect Tom Brady. James Devlin's the guy. Done for the year after a neck injury. In the Week 2 game against the Dolphins, they waited and then they had to put him on the IR, expected to be finished for the season. That one is going to hurt. That one's rough. Also around the league after tonight's Monday Night Football game, you had a chance to hear it, the 31-15 loss to the Bears. Washington head coach Jay Gruden said that even after 5 turnovers tonight, Case Keenum is going to remain the quarterback. They are not going to switch to their rookie Dwayne Haskins Jr., 15th overall pick in the draft. They haven't played him yet. Gruden said, the most important thing is we have some continuity. I can't change people every 5 minutes, and I have to give Case an opportunity playing with these new guys. This is his first time in the offense. I think we can get better. To be fair, now, even though he had a nightmare game with the 5 turnovers this evening, Keenum in the previous 2 games had not turned it over at all. And if Haskins isn't ready, he's not ready. But an interesting spot. Looking over at maybe the best story of the day. I don't know if you saw it. It went a little viral last night. There was a man helping from a fire in Philadelphia, right? And the fire was desperate. People were lowering their kids out of the window to get them out of this building. A gentleman actually did amazing. He was catching those kids to get them out of the building safely. He was interviewed by the news, the local news, and he said, "We was catching them unlike Aguilar," meaning Nelson Aguilar of the Eagles. Yeah, ouch. Seems like maybe not necessary there, but it was Hakeem Laws, a former firefighter, and very, great job, phenomenal. Aguilar retweeted the interview with Laws, talking about how he was catching kids unlike Aguilar. Aguilar's response on Twitter, retweeted it. "Thank you for being a hero in the community. I would like to invite you and your family to the next home game." There you go. See, you can deal with the haters and let them get under your skin. You can just do it that way. Kill them with kindness. Good for you, Nelson Aguilar. This week, the Colorado Rockies will complete their season. They will have a 90-loss season, barring a 6-game winning streak to end it. They'll play against the Giants for 3 and then finish this week on Sunday day game against the Brewers. Brewers, by the way, are probably salivating, finding themselves in a wild card chase, looking at a Rockies team to finish the season in the final 3. You got to like that look. Rockies expected to lose 90-plus games after making the postseason the previous 2 years.
They're still playing?
Yuck. Well, technically.
I thought they were done like a month ago.
Well, they were done. They were still playing.
I guess I just haven't watched a game yet.
Yeah, and we're hoping that the Broncos here, we're only 3 games in, that they end up avoiding the fate of the Rockies. This has been it's been fun tonight. We're going to hand it off to our friends at ESPN overnight. One of these Mondays, we're going to do it after a win, and it's going to be much more cheery. But I appreciate everyone who chipped in on the RamosLaw.com text line. The callers, texters, great activity on the text line. A lot of really good, thoughtful texts. Outstanding job. Thank Kevin Kistner. Of course, thank Nick Ferguson for coming on with us. We'll have guests tomorrow as well. There'll be a lot to talk about for the rest of the week as they get ready for Jacksonville, trying to get that first win of the season. My name is Sean Drotar. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like at @SDrotar, the traditional spelling of Drotar, SDROTAR. This has been The Fan Late Night. Thanks for listening to Denver Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3, The Fan.
sports. This is ESPN Radio Sports Center all night. From expert analysis, informative interviews, electrifying highlights, and breaking news, this is Sports Center all night on ESPN Radio and ESPNRadio.com.
Just when the offense gets on track in New York, a big part of it is out for a couple of months. And from the world of college, Kansas comes under some intense